Welcome to CCOP, the world's largest prison by capacity in El Salvador, which was constructed to imprison the highest profile criminals. Those who enter this prison are destined never to leave alive. These gangs faced a dramatic crackdown starting in March 2022. Under President Nayib Bukele's administration, over 70,000 individuals, about 2% of the country's adult population, were arrested within just 16 months. Buses transported thousands of chained gang members to CCOT in a tightly coordinated nighttime operation. Sitting one behind the other, heads lowered, they looked like a single mass. Surrounded by armed guards, none of them dared to resist commands. It's also important to note that a small number of innocent people were mistakenly imprisoned during the big crackdown. Because of the no-contact policy, their families have no idea where they are or if they are still alive. For some, this documentary could be their first chance to see a missing loved one. There are 32 cells in every one of the 8 modules making up the mega prison. Each cell holds around 80 inmates, but the number can go as high as 150. Despite not being at full capacity, the inmates only have 0.5 square meters of personal space each. Prisoners do not have any ventilation rights or courtyards to walk outside their cell.
Each inmate here have been given one of the longest sentences you can even imagine in your life. The only thing that doesn't change that all these inmates will never get outside. They will never see sunlight. The only people are authorized to get inside and outside are the personnel and sometimes media like us. They will never ever leave this building. If you see their look, you can see the emptiness in their soul. They don't have any hope towards future. They look very robotic.
Welcome to What's Left, a weekly political discussion challenging the mainstream left. My name is Andy Libson, and we're joined today by Kenny Zepeda, who we haven't seen in a while. Welcome, Kenny. We are online at Whatsleftpodcast.com. Please subscribe, rate, review, turn on your notifications, share your favorite episode, and jot down our information wherever you found this episode. Oh, yeah, I also sell shirts, so if you want shirts, come and get them from me. Anyway, again, welcome, Kenny. Eduardo is not going to be here. He's traveling from the Bay Area back to Mexico, and so will probably be joining us next week. And Kenny agreed to join us for a special episode of What's Left that's being recorded at 7:30 a.m. on a Saturday, because fatherhood and a hard work life make this, if you want Kenny to join you on your podcast, this is what you got to do.
Yeah. Yes, my kid has to give me permission. Yeah, but like you said, it's, work is very busy and getting squeezed a lot. So
yeah. Now, before we get started, we're going to be talking about mass deportations, or the mass deportation system, if you will. But before we get started in that, is there anything you want people should know, just because it's been a while since we saw you? Is there anything you want to share with me or us about how you're doing, or where you've been, what you're up to, that can kind of just let people know that, how you are?
I guess, just working a lot, trying to figure out this whole parenting thing. But I'm balancing, the insane amount of hours I'm working. Because I got a promotion at work, which was kind of necessary just to make ends meet, and because it's either that or having 2 jobs, right?
Right.
So, but I essentially work 11 to 13-hour days almost every day. And so that, in tandem with parenting, just occupies most of my time. And so, just trying to make it through and being horrified as what's happening in the labor force, I guess. Especially in my industry, or in the industrial, I guess, sphere. Because I feel that it's not just happening to us, but it's just everywhere. The economy is, people I think are aware what's happening to the economy. So cutting efficiency. No overtime means more work for supervisors, which I am right now. And so that's been my life, and just trying to stay sane in that process. But
Yeah, and that's actually going to piece of what we talk about today.
Mhm.
So that's something I want to talk about. But are you free to share what you do?
um, yeah, I guess so. I mean, I work at a poultry company. I supervise the quality department for an area, I guess, and then yeah, so in charge of more technical and regulatory stuff that has to do with the USDA. So that's what I'm doing right now.
Yeah. Um, and any story you can tell about parenting, about being a dad? Because wait, how old is your kid? 2 years now?
Almost two,
Yeah.
two in a month actually. But I mean, you know, again, nothing is separate from what we discuss here. You know, we because the biggest thing is that we don't do screen time. Very, very minimal. You know, she gets to see pictures, but no cartoons, no nothing.
Wow.
She has a ton of books. You know, we she goes to the library often, and I see the massive difference that makes.
Yeah.
And her vocabulary is extensive, not being two, and I'm like in shock. I come home and then she knows a million things. Or recently I discovered that we've been singing songs, you know, mostly in Spanish because we're focusing on Spanish first, and then English she'll learn eventually. And but I come home and then massive changes, and there's massive changes in days, in a week, and then she's a different person. Right now we're having almost full-on conversations, and like I was mentioning about the songs, so I started a song, I pause, and then she continues the song, and I'm in shock. Like, and she knows multiple songs, not just one. And it's just I'm just amazed at her development, and the difference that it makes to listen and to look at her in the eyes, to pay attention, to engage. You know, we recently went to a bookstore, and the librarian made a comment where we mentioned we don't do screen time, and she's like, "Oh, so you actually have to talk to your kid." And
Yeah.
that is true, and it makes a huge difference. And so it's very inconvenient for the world we live in. You know, like a world full of convenience, and but it's the right way to do it. We believe in, and we can see the results. So
Yeah, and I think first of all, congratulations then, on being able. I know that was important to you, and you and your partner have been able to do that. And if you can carry on for 2 years, then the chance of carrying on for 2 more years is increased.
yeah,
Um, but I personally think, as I listened to that, I was talking with Brandy today. We do our family walk in the morning, um, and I was going over these articles about the border patrol, facial recognition being used on immigrants and non-immigrants, like people, anybody coming through. We'll talk more about that, like this fourth IR attack that is coming as a result of mass deportation agenda, just being a part of it. And it was it's just very scary for her to hear about it. And I was like, well, we're completely prone right now because we're not fighting it. We're actually applauding it, and
yeah.
we're asking for it. But I think the story you tell about your daughter, the quickness with which she can learn, I do believe that about people. I believe that about all people. And I know as we're older, we learn slower. But I believe that if people changed the way they approached the world and the state and each other, and saw the state as the enemy and each other as the solution,
Mhm.
I think your daughter's story is not just a story about a single daughter. I think it's a story of human ability to transform, and to transform into something wonderful. Um, and I actually believe there's a revolutionary lesson in that. So uh, I just want to start with that because we're going to talk about some really dark stuff today.
And
Um, yeah, go ahead.
I just want to add that I mean I personally believe that I may not be politically active, in ways that I've been previously, but this is a political act. This is an act of defiance.
Mhm.
What we're trying to do because uh, I am very deeply aware of things. I don't know everything, right? stuff that we're discussing, but all this directly affects her future, my future, everyone's future. And we're gonna need a lot more people to try to do what we're trying to do, and we'll find a lot of hurdles, obstacles, and fights, that may not seem important for the bigger picture, but they're part of the equation. They're not the only thing, but it is part of the overall, effort that we
Yep.
have to put in.
Yep. Oh, and by the way, me and Brandy sing a song together every week.
Nice.
She picks a song, then I pick a song, because she's been singing, like taking singing classes and stuff like that, and so it's actually really nice.
Singing is important for community and learning, apparently.
Yes. Although we don't learn the words nearly as quickly as your daughter. So let's get started. I think like I told you before that we started recording. There's a ton of stuff. So I think let's start with is let's talk about just hit some of the things that have been going on since essentially, I'm going to put it this way now to our audience. We are for open borders here on What's Left. This is true for Kenny. This is true for me. This is true for Eduardo. Not quite true for Hema. It's almost true for Brandy. She's working on it. I believe it's true for Jessica. And I think it's true for Michael Hoffman. These are all folks who, so I would say What's Left is open borders. We don't want any national boundaries defended by any goddamn state. And I think these last months have shown why that is the only position you can take if you want to stop this. Because what we have seen in these last several months is the surveillance state, is people asking for mass deportation and lauding Trump as being a mass deportation president, and in fact complaining he's not mass deporting enough, not as much as he said he was going to do, as a part of criticism. Is, well, here you go, folks. This is what you get. Here's what you get. You get an attack on civil liberties with Mahmoud and Khalil and folks like that being said, if you say anything about Palestine, if you say anything about Israel, that we are calling anti-Semitism, we're deporting your ass whether you're a citizen or not, or whether you got a visa or not. We're going to use AI to scrub the social media of all people applying for or having visas, and look over to see who's maybe saying something that's wrong. We'll deport them. We'll send them out, or at least get them processing. We're going to create a black site, or we're going not create. It's already been created by Bukele, but we're going to utilize a giant prison that actually probably is less like Guantanamo Bay and sounds more like Abu Ghraib. The prisons in the ones that were in Iraq, where people were being stacked like cordwood and pictures being taken. And we're going to send people there with absolutely no due process. And if we find that there's somebody who's completely wrong with put there, well, by the way, we don't get due process anymore because they're already in El Salvador. So, and we have a president and an administration, I shouldn't even say this. We have a ruling class that's basically saying, this is not just a good thing for potentially people who are called illegal or gang members or whatever excuse they want to use for doing such a thing. But this is going to be for homegrown criminals eventually as well, basically skipping due process. And there's more, but those are some of the ones that come up to me that have been a recent exposure of how dangerous mass deportation, when embraced by the working class, is. And why the working class has to be open borders if it's going to resist a state that is attempting to strengthen its hold over everyone in order to do this, and using mass deportation as an excuse. You want to add anything to that kind of laundry list of things that have gone on?
I mean, I guess also using the, discontent that a lot of people have in the state, right? And using the whole idea of attacking corruption, right? And draining that from the system, and in accepting someone like Elon Musk, right, to advance a lot of technological changes in the way we are surveilled, right, and how the different systems and I think we'll get into that through this conversation. But again, long story short, accepting the narratives that they tell us are for our own safety, right? That is the quintessential excuse to advance any nefarious power grab by literally an abuser, right? Like I'm here to protect you, and leaving the agency of you as an individual, and that's the very fascinating part, right? That they've been able to convince a segment of the working class that believes in deeply in individuality, right, and independence from the state, and into accepting these systems and championing, the abuser, uh, ruling class to protect us. Giving them the power and free use of all these tools to cast a net right over everyone, and so that's what I would say.
Yeah. Well, so let me get into some of these articles, and I want to thank Brandy for these because she found a website. Let me see what the name of that website is. And they're actually not against this stuff. They're just it's called biometricupdate.com. And I'll link articles below about some of these things. And so I want to start with, how do we get it so that 238 people are picked up to be sent to CCOP prison with no due process, and 176 of them are known to have are essentially known to not be having committed any the crime that they're supposedly accused of, the crime of being a both illegal immigrant and a gang member.
And what is CCOP prison?
CCOP prison is the prison Mega Max prison built. It's a system of mega prisons built by Bukele in El Salvador that are being used to house large numbers of people. I mean, just to give a few details, basically 80 to 100 people per room, and a total number of prisons that can be held 40,000. No, I mean, what's it called? No outdoor time. They are in their cells 23 hours a day, 23 to 23 and a half hours a day. And as you'll see in a picture here, they get about a half hour of quarter time in which they do exercises and things like that. And everything, it's 24 hours fluorescent light. And you sleep on either the floor. In a cell of 80 people, there's 2 bathrooms and 2 wash things. So it's just, and you either sleep on the floor, you sleep, no pill, no blankets, nothing of that. You don't get visitors. There's no lawyer time. And Bukele and the administration said, you are here for life. You are not leaving this place. I mean, in reality, if people have ever seen the series Andor, and if you look at that prison thing that's built like that actually has kind of better. The one in Andor actually is more humane, even although it's a death sentence there. Like, they didn't know it, but but with the level of control and the level of like confinement that people are used, because they're kept in shackles most of the time, like shoulder restraints most of the time. It's are you on program? And I don't. Do you know the series Andor?
I do not.
Oh my gosh. Okay. Well, anyway, it's a Star Wars thing, and it's got a whole prison thing in it. And some people who've seen it will know what I'm talking about. But that actually is closer to the state of mind of that prison system. And it is not El Salvador's prison. It is the United States' prison that is kind of co-used between Bukele and Trump. Although obviously Bukele started it in El Salvador. So that's something I want to spend a little bit of time on later.
And just maybe for a little context about Bukele is that he came to power being this strong arm, modern, young, tech savvy ruler, right? And who's been able to bring down criminality in El Salvador through these measures. So he's been championed by a lot of conservative groups in the U.S. And he also has deep ties to the whole Bitcoin.
Silicon Valley,
yeah. And so Salvador is also championed as like the dream Bitcoin country, because they're pushing that hard. and there's a lot of questions about it. But the point is that he's not new to these relationships, right? Like he's been groomed and brought about to I guess fame by being deeply tied to these, harsh, technologically backed measures, I guess.
Yeah. Well, and he's the world's coolest dictator. That's his claim to fame.
Mhm.
Um, and he's kind of a Silicon Valley bro, kind of projects
Mhm.
that kind of air about himself. And so I do believe that he is connected to the technocratic prison system that is being built within the world. Not CCOT, but CCOT as we've talked about Palestine and CCOT as sort of um, examples of what kind of world we're going to have. And as people listen to hear about what's being built, these programs that are being built for immigrants and for us here in this country are ultimately no different than Lavender and Where's Daddy being used in Palestine. It's just a question of scale. So uh, the first article was titled "The Customs and Border Protection in the United States: Biometric Photo Capture Technology for Border Vehicle Inspection," and this one talks about how the CBP, Customs and Border Protection, have basically are doing a request for information to capture high quality facial images of all vehicle occupants crossing the border, and it's supposed to like supplement or help the biometrics stuff that they're doing at what they call the pre-primary zone, the place where you first see people entering. This is like basically pictures taken at a toll booth of anyone coming through. And it's going to put every one of those people, not just immigrants or illegal immigrants, but everyone crossing into the United States is going to be facially ID'd and put into and checked against what's called the traveler verification system. And the traveler verification system is a set of biometric facial stuff and fingerprints that are had about anyone who comes into the country who is not a citizen. So the travel vehicle system is supposed to not have citizens on it, but that it's going to essentially cross-reference, facially recognize people without their knowledge because it's just pictures being taken. This is the kind of stuff that's being constructed, and the idea is that within 1 second, they can know everyone coming in through the border and have it and cross-reference them to a travel system. This is part of their facial recognition software. And a second article, and in talking about them trying to put that together, a second article talks about how currently the title of it was, live facial recognition will shape the future of policing in the former UK. I mean, in the UK, says a former UK prime minister or something like that. And they're basically talking about how they don't currently just use facial recognition at the border. They're using facial recognition within the country to basically just check if you are here or not. And again, I suspect they have a similar traveler verification system to check to see, well, okay, now we're going to have facial recognition on all cops, meaning that anyone the police interface with in any way, we can put into our database and have AI scan it and see, do we know who these people are? But the biggest implication for it was for protest. That they basically were saying, you can't be wearing any masks at protests because we need to be able to identify who was at protests. And again, this is very similar to the kinds of things that were done on campuses when people I don't remember who those business guys were talking about, like, all you people who are being seen here on our artificial intelligence driven facial recognition programs, you're not going to be getting jobs because you're going to be seen as anti-Semites and people who are against this country. And so the reason I talk about what's going on in UK is people have to understand that the actual project of starting this facial recognition software being used at the border is all in. Well, if it gets used, it's going to be used on people who are citizens. But it's all in preparation for being used internally for social control. So those are the first two I want to just touch on. And there's more to talk about later.
And obviously, the implication here is that, people, okay, data is being collected, right? And then a set of people is going to decide what's right and what's wrong, right? Like what is politically acceptable, what is politically not. And, so again, this technology doesn't serve the masses, right? It's sold under the pretense of protecting us from harm, right? Like from the bad people coming into the country. When in reality, the people we need to be afraid of is the people using these tools to decide what's right and what's wrong, and who is criminal, who's not a criminal, right? Because there is this assumption that is an objective process, right? That fair people are going to make a judgment on, or a fair set, or even AI, right? Like that is supposed to be an objective tool, but it's not. It's a like I heard sometime back, that someone said that like all these technologies a coded opinion. uh, and um, and the other thing that I wanted to say in relation to the way it's used, so right, CBP is supposed to have jurisdiction over the border, right? But they also have the right to go 100 miles inland, right, from any port of entry. I'm not quite sure, and I think you brought up this question sometime back, if that also applies from airports, right? Because that is a port of entry. So that enhances the net. But if you look, so they are surveilling, people. In on top of that, and I think we'll get into this. These systems are becoming increasingly interoperable, right? Where they are connecting with other systems, and this is something that Jay Kleisek, right, like talked about, how the system of systems, right, like, and ultimately you end up with a big umbrella of mass surveillance that applies to everyone, and for data to be collected and be sorted and decided upon by whomever.
Yeah. I guess I'll just say that just people should remember this term criminal, I think is really like people have to understand when they use a term like criminal that the people who will be deciding who the criminals are in fact the biggest criminals on the globe. They kill more people, they steal more money, they do it on a scale that dwarfs anyone they're talking about in terms of murder, in terms of child pornography, in terms of rapes, in terms of theft of property, in terms of destruction of property. Think about the US ruling class for a moment, folks. Those are the people who are taking gang members, maybe even a violent gang, maybe a person who's killed somebody, and they are building an entire infrastructure of control in the name of stopping that criminal. But go up and think about those people for a second. Think about them. How many people have they murdered? How much money have they stolen? How from us in terms of internally or stolen externally from other countries? When you think of the budget, the military budget, the defense budget, and we talk about that notion just before 9/11 that Rumsfeld had said, you know what, we had trillions of dollars, maybe up to $3 trillion that were not counted for off the books. Those papers supposedly got destroyed, in one of the attacks that happened there on the Pentagon. I mean, think about that level of theft. There's no one who they're putting in jail can even touch the level of criminality in terms of killing, property destruction, theft, more than the people who are actually determining who the criminals are, using that to then build this entire infrastructure in the name of controlling those criminals, to control us all and essentially criminalize us all, right? That's what the story of the Patriot Act is. As you go from wasn't ISIS at the time. You go from Al Qaeda terrorist to internal, terrorist inside the country who wants to make an insurrection. That's the 20-year move they go from. And it was always true. Those of us who criticized it at the time said, "Look, they're just doing the Patriot Act just to come in and bring it home." People didn't believe it because they thought that couldn't happen. Well, that's exactly what happened. And so now you're going to go from illegal immigrant to legal immigrant to citizen. that's how this is going to work, and it's not going to be 20 years into which we're going to see it. And the story I'm telling you about the UK proves it, because they're already doing it in the UK, and you think they're going to do it in the UK and not do that in the United States? You know, like in terms of actually using facial recognition stuff to on its own citizenry. And do you think they're not going to just use AI to scrub the social media of people with visas here in this country, and then not use that later to decide whether citizens have right to have a bank account or have right to leave their homes? Because that's another thing we're going to hear about, is like they're doing fencing with this stuff as well, when we talk about Palantir. So that part is always, like, people keep forgetting that the biggest criminal is the state that is actually empowering itself in order to do something about criminality. And I think that's the trick people have to get over and have to realize.
And I think another result of all this is, the effective creation of the thought police too, right? Because again, your social media, everything that you do in your life is going to be tracked, right? Anything that goes digitally tracked, and any transaction that you do with your digital whatever, any post that you do, your medical history, even your voting history is brought up in these articles. All this is going to create your digital twin, right? That profile of you, and there's also the whole pre-crime thing that seemed like a fiction thing, right? But it's the reality, where who is a dangerous actor or potentially dangerous actor to be watched and monitored more, or to be restricted in certain areas, right, of access. So this is the implications of this digital world, right? Of that someone will decide in it gets excused by a lot of people who are rule followers, right? Because if you have nothing to fear, you have nothing to hide, sort of thing. But that's not the point. The point is that they shouldn't have this power, and it's also, like some of the people that were sent to El Salvador gets kind of like covered over. It's a mistake, and that's not what I'm even afraid of, those sort of cool mistakes. It's just that overall, like, who gets to decide and why? Why do you get to decide? And especially, like you said, and to emphasize that point, when you are the biggest criminals, committing all sorts of levels of violence. And I don't want this tool. This is a scary prospect. And the sad part is that we are well into this world.
Yeah.
And with little response, really. So that's the scary part.
Well, there is a response. The response is they're not doing it. The United States government isn't doing enough. As much as, and Trump is taking some heat because there's obviously innocent people that have been caught in the net, and people get upset about the innocent people that are caught. The problem with most of the people who oppose these same things that we oppose is they look at it in moral terms. Like, they look at it, this is like sad stories, and that's not what's happening. This is not a sad story. This is a story of violence against all of us. And it's a story of what the hell are these? Look what these mass criminals are doing, because in the name of fighting criminality. So it's not. This isn't immoral. This isn't like, oh, that's too bad. That's wrong that happened to that one person. They're in the name of what they're doing to one person, so-called innocent or guilty. They are creating a web for all of us, and that's what's missed. Is like, your enemy is our enemy is strengthening itself through putting fear into us. I think what I want to do next is to go into the Palantir article, because I want to go into some detail. And what I'm going to do is just read some of the stuff and then maybe you'll comment on some of the stuff I'm reading. The title of this one is Palantir's Immigration OS Fuels Trump Administration's Immigrant Removal Agenda. And first, that's a title that one of the problems with biometric update is they somehow think that Biden was using this better than Trump. So these people are for biometric use. They just thought that Biden was doing a better job. But there's other articles I found that said Biden was using all the same technology, developing all the same technology, developing these sorts of connections with Palantir and stuff like that, to do this. It's all part of a continuum of projects. So this is not Trump's agenda. This is the U.S. ruling class agenda.
And I just want to add that is the danger of looking at things through moral terms, because the article does that. Like, oh, this person was doing a better, more ethical, job than the other, when it's the same concept.
Yeah, that's right. Thank you. That's a really important point. Yeah. So U.S. Immigration's Custom Enforcement, better known as ICE, awarded a $30 million contract to Palantir Technologies to develop Immigration OS. Immigration OS is an end-to-end digital ecosystem that automates the life cycle of deportation. Its architecture is built to optimize three primary enforcement areas. First, the system prioritizes targets using AI to sift through immigration records, criminal histories, and social indicators such as known affiliations or prior infractions. Social indicators are just social media. Second, it provides near real-time monitoring of self-deportation, enabling ICE to track individuals who exit the United States. Third, it supports what the agency refers to as immigration lifecycle management, which includes coordinating logistics for detentions, removals, and administrative follow-through to minimize operational delays. And here's the part you were talking about before. At the center of this platform is the integration of data from an extraordinary range of sources. Immigration OS pulls from the Social Security Administration. That means pulling data from that, from from the IRS, Internal Revenue Service, from the U.S. Citizenship and Immigration Services, and also from state voter rolls. And Doge, and it mentions this later, Doge has become this is the connection to Doge. Doge has become a clearinghouse for siphoning sensitive records from across the federal government, often without clear statutory authority, and supplying it to the enforcement programs like Immigration OS. And so this is where what you were talking about, the Doge program of centralizing all that data this is going to be used to justify what they're doing. This system, Immigration OS, is being used in conjunction with the current system called Alien Tracker. Alien Tracker features a geospatial interface that displays potential targets by location and assigns field teams to apprehend them. So what we're talking about here is like, okay, we've got you, we've got your face, we've got your biometrics, we can track you on a board electronically, like a GPS, and we know where our immigration people are, and we can just kind of lock them in. And this was talked about in another program, they talked about this in terms of, we're not going to necessarily put you in prisons. Like, we're not going to have deportation centers. We just want to be able to track where you are, know where the nearest place that can grab you if it needs to. And when the time comes and we think your time is up, we know where you are. We have the team to grab you. They grab you and send you out, right? This is how, and I think people, when they hear this, they should think about, if you heard what we said about lavender and where's daddy, this is a system which is just AI controlled, basically finding where you are using GPS and using the various mediums, and basically then saying, okay, we've located where you are. Now where's the drone that's where's the nearest drone that's going to like blow you up? This is all part of a continuum, right? So this isn't drones at this point. These are connecting you to law enforcement teams. They're going to pick you up, but it's the same system. And Alien Tracker integrates data from multiple federal agencies, including the Social Security one, including the UCSIS. Well, that was the other one that was the, let's see, what was that one? That is the Citizenship and Immigration Services, Bureau of Alcohol and Tobacco, Firearms and Explosives. And also Alien Tracker is starting to integrate information from Department of Labor, Health and Human Services, and Department of Housing and Urban Development. So again, this is a massive web a data web that's being built. If people are afraid of that, there's no way of stopping that unless you've opposed deportations and unless you oppose the state enforcing its border. So open borders is the only position you can use to stop that. There's no reforming of this. There's no like, oh, just do part of that. Because otherwise you're just going to get Biden versus Trump versus Obama versus Clinton, so I'll just leave it at, I'll say that. I'll just leave it at that.
So much that this kind of brings up for me. So, I mean, have to go back 5 years to the COVID, era, and I just remember that we started talking about Palantir at some point. When we were challenging all the narratives that were being pushed out, and
Oh,
I just
can I,
remember.
and people should remember Palantir is Peter Thiel. Peter Thiel is JD Vance. Like these are the connections. So just this is not these are big names when we bring up Palantir.
And so again, just to say the part about Palantir, they're a big player in all this. They've been deeply involved, since COVID, in casting, building a net. But I just found it shocking that back then, some people I knew that were in like the biology and healthcare field were defending Palantir. And in order to justify the measures that were being approved, which is just like mind blowing, but I guess it makes sense. When you spend so much time, money, and resources marketing yourself as a benevolent institution. And then the other thing that was brought up here is okay, so all these things are being gathered, right, and supposedly to catch a bad person, right, a criminal, supposedly, right. But so where does it stop, right? Like it talked about social indicators. So what about if you're found guilty? What about the associations? Like so the net keeps going, and it keeps going and going, and everyone gets casted in the net, just by associating with a quote unquote criminal. And so again, the implications of all this, right? Like it doesn't stop. The nodes are multiple, and they just keep opening new nodes. Or, the more points of data that they collect, and in order to justify again mass surveillance, because it's so essentially we're all guilty until proven innocent, right?
Yeah.
So that paradigm is flipped big time.
Yeah, and try to remember your point because I want to say something about that, which is anybody who's been here on YouTube that's said anything like that got an episode taken down should understand that the algorithm that's being used on YouTube and the this vague community standards that is being spoken of as the basis for when your thing gets taken down. This is the system that's going to be in play for deciding whether you get deported, whether you go to CCOT, whether you lose your bank account. It's that arbitrary. And people should ask themselves, wait, when your thing has been taken down, are you able to talk to somebody about that? No. It gets decided by AI, and it gets adjudicated by AI when you bring your thing. The only time that is not the case is when you have a person on YouTube who's got a big enough account where they get to talk to a human. That's the system we're talking about. You should ask yourself, that's the world that's going to happen. Basically, when you get picked up by AI, which is essentially arbitrary, and it's effectively arbitrary because you can't really ask the system, why did I get spit out? Because it's a whole array of it's an AI array of indicators that it just says, well, this is your name, and one of the things that was talked about in the British one is like, well, here's the thing. The facial recognition only makes a mistake 1 out of 6,000 times, and it's like, okay, that's basically 50,000 people in a country of 300 million. That's 50,000 people a day, basically being picked up wrong. So and that's using their just facial recognition. So people have to understand that what we are being acclimated to here on social media, to this arbitrary, well, sorry, your post doesn't count. Your thing gets deleted. Da 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 da. That's the system that's being put into play for deciding who goes to prison, who gets deported. In Lavender, who gets killed. It's all the same system, and it's AI run, and this is Doge. This is what is being built by Doge. So people who celebrate Doge getting created, you have to understand it's a gigantic data collection web being used to create this system. So sorry, that was a long time, but
I think it's great, and just want to add that again, this to me is what then starts modifying the way people communicate and voice opinions, right? Because like now if you're flagged on one of your social medias, now you're a suspect, but because you're going against certain norms, now you're probably flagged, in like as a person to be watched because you're saying unpopular things,
Yeah.
and again, this is the consequence really of supporting all this shit that they pushed in the pandemic, right? Like, yeah, go after those bad people, go after people I disagree with, those people are uncivilized, they don't care about other humans, yes, state, please control us, please give us rules, please tell us what to do, yes, shelter in place, following all this shit, that now if you actually have done some research, know that it was full fucking lie.
Yeah.
Like, it was all a lie, and the result is this. Like, this doesn't come out of nowhere, this doesn't just come out of persecuting immigrants. This has been a long process of evolving into this, and immigrants happen to be the latest
Right.
group to pin it on, right? Like, just like the unvaccinated was during the pandemic, or the Muslims, right? Like, were in 2001, post 9/11. So again, it's just the latest justification for something of mass consequences for everyone, for people who want to rule us and control us, and know that they have to in order to maintain, this pyramid scheme that they have going on. And so and right in the context of an escalating war that, with other powers, in a world that is small enough, it's too small for too many powers, right? In a game that is a violent game of a winner take all, so it's in that context that we are getting caught in a net that we are allowing in some people, and I mean the working class,
Yeah.
and some people even asking for and championing
Correct.
to feel safe, because we've been trained, we've been brainwashed into believing that these fuckers are here to help us, to save us, to protect us, when in reality it's the opposite. They're here to justify, to create smog, so that you accept this shit that they call protection and safety, when we're all sick, we're all tired, we're all exploited, we're all full of, all the things that we, the opposite of what we want, and so just driving that point, these narratives, we have to be very careful. We have to reject them. Like, they are guilty until proven innocent.
Yeah. Yes. Right.
From my head,
I don't think we have to be careful. We just have to have knee-jerk response to just disbelieve everything they say, and know that if they're trying to make us move to the left, we likely need to go to the right. Now, that's not always true. Sometimes they do a thing where it's like, we know you think we're lying, so we're going to try to push you to left because we know you're going to go right. But you have to know that whatever you're being told by them is not for the reason they're giving it to you. It certainly isn't the reason to keep you safe. It's the opposite. And I've shown this thing at others times. I want to show it right here. Look, this is Pew Research Center information on immigration. On the undocumented population in the United States, up into basically the end of 2023. Like, Kenny, what do you see on that?
pretty steady. It's not, a significant jump. It actually decreased right from 2008.
I mean, the reason I show this is because the language would suggest that between 2020 and 2023, there would be this massive increase.
Mm-hmm.
And it hasn't even gotten to the level yet of 2008, which was under Bush. You are being lied to about immigration, about illegal immigration.
And I just want to add something,
Should I go off? Should I not?
It's okay. I mean, you can keep it, but about this number, right? Like in 2008, just remember that's not far from when NAFTA came into place, and they started clamping down and immediately illegalized people that would come and go and work. There was a revolving door prior to them closing, try to shut down the doors of immigration. People would come and work, and people didn't want to reside here in the United States. People would come because their countries were, messed up for a million reasons.
Yeah.
But again, it's just that like millions of people suddenly became illegal, because they started clamping down even more on the border to serve NAFTA, right? To uh, make a lot more people vulnerable, to throw them into the labor market in order to use them as they wish, right? That's just something to me that's important to highlight, that these like 10, 12 million wasn't a big issue until like relatively recent.
Right. And to say that one of the reasons people are being lied to about immigration, and it was a lie, and it's a lie that propagated by both the left and the right, in terms of like, oh my God, illegal immigration is out of control. It's like the same as it's been as always. Like it's been this way for almost 15 years, a decade and a half. It's really no different. But what is different is, this is an article I found. This came from Due Dissidence.
Mm-hmm.
UPS cut 20,000 jobs this year, about 4% of its global workforce, right? Why did it do that? And people, the tariffs or da-da-da. No, here's the big reason. UPS said it expects to use more automation in its facilities, from sorting packages to label applications to loading and unloading trucks, with 400 facilities becoming partly, if not fully, automated.
Mm-hmm.
Another quote by UPS manager boss: with this configuration, we will also lessen our dependency on labor. This is what's happening, folks. Like automation to build this technocratic prison for all of us is being, like, all this data collection is used to feed and train AI that goes into replacing us at the workplace. Your job's not getting taken by an immigrant. Your job is getting taken by you celebrating the mass deportation apparatus that is being used to collect data on all of us, that is then being used to train AI, which is fucking taking your job. Idiot. So that's like, mass deportation is literally asking for, please kick me in the nuts over and over and over again, so that you can train your guy to like replace me at work. And so this is what's happening.
That's, and I would add that your job is being taken by capitalism. This is the way it fucking works.
Yeah.
And those jobs are not coming back. If there's jobs coming back, the quality, just expect more exploitation, more metrics being on your ass, more, and if you, like Amazon runs, like if you don't keep up with what they're asking you to do, then you're tossed out, like trash.
Yep.
And until they can find a better solution of replacing your ass, in again, there's this comedian, I don't know the name, just ran into it. He's like an immigrant comedian, and he was joking about how when he came to this country, he started cleaning tiny toilets in a preschool, and that he fulfilled his dream of coming to America. And then he says, I'm sorry if your dream of cleaning tiny toilets was taken away by me doing that job. And again, this whole notion that, again, it's a popular scare to fuel right-wing, by and large, fears of jobs being taken. They're not taking quality jobs. Most immigrants are taking shit jobs. And in fact, if the quote unquote good quality jobs, they're welcome in. They're allowed in, and Trump is a big supporter of that shit. Bringing the high paying jobs into the U.S. So again, it's just ridiculous that is but it works, right? Like a narrative that works. That's what I'll say about that.
Yeah, and just to say that even when like the same administration that was saying we're doing something about immigration to protect your job, which is a complete lie. They are doing something about immigration so they can build a technocratic prison for all of us and collect data from all of us to empower their AI, both to control us internally and fight their wars externally. That is the reason that they are building this. It's not for that.
Can I add something?
Yeah.
Maybe I'll give it time. But if you're afraid of North Korea, if you're afraid of Cuba, if you're afraid of Venezuela, then you don't know what the fuck you're facing right now.
Right.
You know, and again, that again is also a tactic. Look over there, but don't mind over here. Let us take care of you.
Yeah.
But that shit is child's play. Any fears that were like fueled into your head about those situations, we're experiencing something massive. And when I say no response, it's like a counter. Like we don't have a real weight of organized masses to counter this. And that it's almost like that's another conversation about my own journey. And but the fact is that this is what we talk about revolution, right? It's not because we love violence, right? Because that's again also what gets hyped up about revolution is the fact that you have to rebel against authoritarianism.
Yeah.
And this is it.
Yeah.
What else do you want? What else? This is a centralizing mechanism of surveillance, policing, preemptive policing, thought control. And it's so intrusive and invasive in a very again. This is stuff of science fiction, and what we're saying sounds to some people conspirational, right? Like because that's a dirty word that they love to use.
Yeah.
But this is a fact. This is like this is happening in real time under the pretense of protection.
Yeah. And if you believe it's a conspiracy, just read one of the articles that is printed out by Biometrics Update. Just go ahead and read it and see what you think.
And there's other things. Yes, like if you don't believe this source, go to other sources. And like, for example, look at what's happening in Atlanta, and how they're, like using all these privately owned cameras to feed into a centralized system of pre-crime, essentially.
Yes.
And look in other cities, look at the way in San Francisco, the automated cars are also feeding information to the cops. And who's going to make those decisions again, like what's wrong, what's right? And have you like, and I guess if you believe the state is just a purely objective actor, then you don't fucking understand history. You've never seen history.
Yep.
There's some shit to read because like centralized power. I think we all have that notion in the many cartoons or movies that we've seen, but this shit is happening in real time. Like,
Yeah. And I'll read one last article that I found because there was something I found while they mentioned something called the Hurricane Report. Did you remember hearing about this Hurricane Report?
I don't.
The Hurricane Report is just well, I shouldn't say just. It's a way of assigning a score to a person for potential deportation. And here's the article that talked more about that. It was in this thing called Context. What tech is Trump using to ramp up deportations? Again, Biden is using it. They say it even in the article. From surveillance towers to facial recognition, the United States is relying heavily on advanced technologies to monitor and deport immigrants. Artificial intelligence and other fast-developing innovations are proving to be powerful enforcement tools in the hard-line immigration campaign launched by President Donald Trump. In March, U.S. Customs and Border Protection released a new version of CBP Home, an app for users to navigate the agency's approval process. The app has a new self-deport feature for undocumented immigrants to tell the government they are voluntarily leaving the country. To self-deport, undocumented immigrants provide photos, their intended country of destination, and confirmation they have enough money to depart. Think about that, people. Like, do you think that kind of program is just going to be ultimately used on? Like, this is a beta test for basically controlling anyone who they were going to keep in a particular place, and also we want to know that you have enough money to leave, or whether you have access to it before we allow you to do so. ICE uses AI in its alternative to detention operations. This is how I think they're going to be using it more, because they don't want those kids in cages stuff. They're going to do this instead, which allows some undocumented immigrants to stay in their communities, often under house arrest, while their cases are processed. To keep track, the agency runs intensive supervision appearance program. This is called the hurricane score, which uses machine learning to assign a hurricane score. The score helps determine how likely immigrants may flee or comply with the program. The score is used to decide whether they can be exempt from detention and the conditions of their release. ICE uses similar tools known as the risk classification assessment in making detainment decisions and evaluating risks of flight. It's happening. It's already taking place.
All I see is like they're asking us to line up to get sorted.
Yeah.
And if you don't line up, then you'll face some consequences. And again, what we were talking about 4 years ago with regards to the pandemic, this is the next step. This is not what's happened here. It's not just about immigration, right? Like we just made that point. It's related to every step before. And again, I don't know how much we want to get into it, but there's also reasons this is happening. This is not just to get power for power's sake, but it's out of necessity of the context that the U.S. is facing in terms of the pressures of competition abroad and for control of the world. And again, it's not because, again, even people on the left, right, defend China and what they're doing, and supposedly more communist, and because they're anti-capitalist, supposedly they're better, and so some people blindly defend China. No, they're all in the same game in the competition of who gets to control their own population more in order to do the shit they have to do abroad for the small group that rules those states as well.
Yep.
And again, it's just like it's all connected. In my head that we're facing these pressures because they also know what's coming. They understand a system that's in perpetual crisis and is getting harder to solve those crises. And so they're going to have more tools to control and nudge the masses that can potentially upset,
right,
their team, and so they know what's at stake. They know that the future is not bright, and and they will also have to sort through whose heads are going to get sacrificed.
Right. And that's where that thing of and if you don't get nudged properly, if they aren't able to use nudges to get you there, and you happen to understand that the nudges are just being used as a basis of control, and you are planning on resisting, because you're right, it's not about power, it is about them predicting what level of control they will need over their population to do the things what they need to do in the next stages of retaining power and increasing their power. That brings us back to CCOT, right? Like what they have in line for us is prisons where here's prisoners arrive barefoot and shackled with their heads bowed. They're forced to kneel in tight rows with their heads shaved upon arrival. If they are to be punished, they are put into a smaller area cell that is completely dark. No sunlight ever, no clocks, no time makers. Inmates experience profound psychological deterioration. In fact, some people are saying because they're kept so silent that they stop learning how to speak and things like that. In terms of sleep, each cell is designed for 80 people, but often it surpasses 100. Inmates sleep on concrete floors without mattresses or on iron bunk tiers where they must lay across the metal slats. Cells are so crammed full they sleep standing up or take turns lying down. No pillows, no blankets. No visits from family or lawyers. No letters or phone calls. All cell signal is blocked for 1.5 mile radius. Most inmates have never even been formally charged or sentenced. So this is where this leads. And actually, beyond that, we get to places like Palestine and Lavender. And this is the spectrum upon which we are walking and racing, and if you are against the COVID narrative, but you currently support mass deportation, then you are literally facilitating the very same process that was put in place with around COVID. So, this there's no way to oppose this other than understanding that we must take the weapon of borders out of our rulers' hands and oppose any border surveillance whatsoever.
Yeah, and I think it goes beyond that, right? It's because yes, opposition, right? But individual acts are not going to solve anything. And individual acts, even what we're doing here, right? Yeah, we're passing some information, but this is not the action, right? Like this is not. We've talked about this previously, and this is not building something real.
Right.
What we're doing. That's the reality. Um, because when I say it goes beyond that, it's gonna be finding ways back, I guess, to socialize in person and do things in community, and take action in community and building things in community. Because again, that jail that you just mentioned, CCOP, right?
Peacock, yeah.
Okay, that represents the opposite, right, of what I'm saying right now, because that is isolation, that is people being silenced, right? It's a metaphor for what's happening outside. Like, yeah, that is a scary place, and it was easy for, I think, Salvadorians to accept that because they were faced with high levels of violence that these gang members did. That is real, they faced that reality. So I don't judge Salvadorians so much, and they'll have to find their own journey through that process, because there will be consequences of this on their own. And but again, you have to understand history to understand the context of why it got to that point, why it got so violent, why gang took root in El Salvador. If you don't understand the level of violence that the U.S. introduced to that nation in the 80s, then you wouldn't understand why it's been so violent.
Right.
And why people accepted this now. And I guess what I'm saying I'm saying a bunch of things, but ultimately, what I think the solution is going to require us to disconnect from all the shit that they're showing in our face, because this fucking cell phone is a sensor. We're all being, and I am. The reality is that I'm no better than most people. The way the fucking phone hooks me, but I'm aware that something has to change in order to affect change, and the change is not going to come on an individual level. This is why I consider myself, a socialist, slash communist, not because fuck the USSR, and all that shit. That we have to look at that critically, but because I believe in the power of community, I believe in the power of association in accomplishing magnificent things, in accomplishing healthy things too. And that's what it's going to take, and that's what I mean by beyond. Like, it's beyond just opposing one single fucking thing, because this is a massive net with massive things, a bunch of nods of things that are I don't even fully understand. And that's why like I've commented before on the stuff that Alison McDowell shares and Jay Kleisig, because it is important to understand, but I can't expect everyone to fucking fully understand everything in order to move to something. That's why my message is simple. It's like, question everything they fucking tell you. And they don't have your benefit in their mind. And by they, I mean the people that make the rules. They're always lying to us. And I don't expect you to become an expert on a particular every subject. It's impossible. What the message to me is that that it's going to take community. It's going to take people together physically, taking up space without fucking cell phones, without even computers. More like going back to basics of being human. Rescuing our humanity and enhancing our humanity without this fucking technology that they say is enhancing, or whatever bullshit they sell us. Because that is the trap. And it comes in, and we were going to face a million traps, but it's all for the same reasons.
Yeah. Well, I think you used the right word, and it is true. We are no one of us is going to be an expert in what they're doing. Each of us is going to see some facet of this multifaceted crystal. And I think some people think like, oh, I got to figure it all out. You cannot. No one person can see all that thing. We only get to see aspects of it. And I think I like that you use that term experts, because we won't need to become experts in what they are. We will need to become experts in what we are. We will need to become experts in our neighbors and in working with them and talking with them and understanding them. That's where our expertise is going to need to be. And how do we collaborate honestly with each other? Because if it's built on some kind of lie, it won't work. And that is going to be the challenge. The thing that they have done now is made us more aware of them and made us less aware of each other with this system that they're putting in place. And that's what it means when I am in a classroom and I say, okay, students, you have free time. Can we get up? Can we use our phones? I was like, okay. And then you have 4 students sitting at a table who are each looking at their phone, like not talking to each other and possibly cursing or saying something out of that's inappropriate. That would be better for them to engage each other than when we see them just kind of go to their phone and be like da, 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 da. But that is the world that is being designed for us. But the world that escapes us is the world that you're attempting to introduce your daughter to. And I think, yeah, I think that revolution will mean that a generation that is being trained to avoid each other and avoid themselves is going to have to be trained in a different way. And we are going to have to untrain and retrain ourselves. I do believe that's very possible, but it won't happen by accident.
And I guess to maybe going full circle, and I might get emotional because I'm talking about my daughter. So when we go out, my daughter, she's very social. She'll go up to people and say hi, and most people ignore her, adults. And sometimes it hurts, and because I want the best for her, but that's the spirit I want to keep alive. That she will be really sorry. It's just emotional because it's what's at stake. This for me, like my daughter again, she doesn't have screen time, so she goes to people and she will insist, say hi. And out of 10 people, maybe 2 people will say, but that's the sad state that we're in. We're ignoring each other. We don't see each other in the eyes. We don't actually take time because this shit, all this fucking technology, you know, it's a fucking trap, So seeing her is a reminder, of what we need to do. That playing with sticks, learning to be bored, learning to deal with your boredom is important. That books are important. That engaging with the world, discovering things is important. Being amazed is important. In not through a mediator, right, like a fucking screen, but in real. That's what being human is. And so that's my mission. That's the fight I'm fighting to make sure that she keeps as much of her humanity as possible, because that is pure and that is beautiful and that is worth fighting for. Um, and so, again, that is my act of rebellion right now, to safeguard her humanity as much as possible, because the opposite is sad, to see kids consuming of sort of trash, and us, adults are get weird. I'm trapped, to a degree on that shit. I know, I'm aware,
Yeah,
but I see her and I want to protect her.
yeah. Um, I think that pretty much says it. Well, I did not. When we talked on the phone, one of the things you brought up was how all this nonsense personally impacted you and made you afraid. And I thought we were going to talk a little bit more about that. But I think by virtue of what you shared about your daughter in the beginning and here at the end, I actually think as that's as important as any because I thought more of our discussion was going to be this shit directly impacts Kenny. It impacts us all. But like you were telling me, you felt it like personally, like the web closing in. But I really feel like what you're sharing about your family and your daughter is really the most important lesson, because I think there's a lot of hope in it.
Yeah, I mean, and again, you have to focus on the good things, I guess, and something that gets harder when you're in deep into shit, like. And again, I'll briefly say, yes, I'm afraid, and this is something I said to my partner when we started dating again, and I said, look, I've said some stuff. There's history online. I'm afraid of the future. I'm afraid that they'll whoever's in power for whatever reason, they can use whatever the history I have online and come up with their own reasons to complicate my life. So I said, and like it probably felt like a crazy thing to say, but at the time, but here we are 5 years later, right? Like, you know, this is why I don't edit much of the things, on this show, because I'm like, whoever wants to fuck me up is gonna come up with their own hit story to tell about myself, and it has given me pause to come on the show, and keep continuing to speak, because I have a family to take care of, and but at the same time, it's like, what is my other option? To stay silent, watch everything wreck in front of me, and do nothing?
Yeah.
So I have no option. Like, I have no option but to say what is in my mind, be honest and true, because then I will be dishonest with myself, and I can't. I can't stay silent. Not speaking about the things I see, and again, it's for the same purpose, to take care of my kid, to take care of her future, her humanity, and to help her navigate this crazy world that is coming into shape, that will be it's unrecognizable from our childhood. Like, it's fucking insane.
Yeah. Yep. Well, I'm really glad it's good to see you again, Kenny. It's good to have you back. And I'm glad we could talk about this today. So that does it for this week's episode. What's Left is a weekly Jeez, what's wrong with me? What's Left is a weekly political podcast channel challenging the mainstream left. We post information about our topics and our guests on the episode notes wherever you found this episode, or on our blog, whatsleftpodcast.com. You can find links to our blog in the episode notes. If you want to reach out to us about ideas for future episodes, feel free to use this link to contact us at What's Left directly. I remind you, if you like anything you've heard here, please subscribe, rate, review, turn on your notifications to any of our platforms that we're on: Spotify, iTunes, BitChute, Odyssey, Rumble, YouTube, or Telegram. So that's pretty much it. Kenny, thank you again for doing this with me. It's good to have you back. And you're always on our What's Left crew. We're not going to get to see you every week, maybe even every month. But on occasion, Kenny's going to come back and join us and do episodes like this if Andy's willing to wake up early.
Yeah, once I find an out of the trap I'm in right now, I'm always trying to get back. But yes.
Well, I do think you found an out with what you're doing with your partner and your daughter. And I think that's your out. And keep it up. And we'll be here for you when you can make it here.
Thank you.
All right, folks. See you again next week.